Welcome. This is Worth Quoting, and I'm your host today, Charlotte Minter. Our guests today are Maria Perez, who is has a consulting firm, Perez-Arton, from New York City, and Dr. Marie McDemmond, who is the Vice President for Finance and Chief Operating Officer at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. Our subject today is leadership, and Mrs. Perez is an executive recruiter, and in her role, she's constantly looking for people who exemplify the type of leadership that we need today. And our other guest is one of those people who, in her job, exemplifies that type of leadership. So what we'd like to talk a little bit about today is both the roles that you play, the leadership attributes that we need in today's world, and how that is changing and has changed, and what are some of those impacts on us, particularly in education, as we look at the situation that we have in Florida today. So, Ms. Perez, I wonder if you would start and tell us a little bit about if you're employed by a company and you have to go, or university or college, I guess, usually,
yes,
and your job is to recruit a new president for that, say, university or community college like we have here today. Tell us a little bit about what you would think about and what you would do and talk about in that situation.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me to join you today. College and university leadership, community college, research university, state college leadership is a very rapidly changing role. Our society is changing around us very quickly. There are a lot of challenges in front of our current and future presidents. And both the institution and people like myself who work with institutions are looking for people who are going to rise to these challenges. I think for all of us, the major attributes that we are looking for and skills that we are looking for are individuals who can work with an enormously broad array of people, be they students, faculty, administrators, trustees, the community, the business community, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Thanks to the advent of the electronic age, and even more so the, I've forgotten what they call it now, well, let's say the video age, for lack of a better word, or the digital age might be a better way of describing it. We truly are, in some senses, becoming a global village. And one can no longer sit in Jacksonville as the president of the Florida Community College at Jacksonville and pretend the world doesn't exist. It is a huge world, and it comes to our campuses. Everyone is also looking, and will have to look, increasingly for people with very strong financial skills. Just as society is saying to us that we can no longer afford to spend money in the way we have spent it for medical services, for any variety of things, but particularly in social services, the message is becoming louder and louder, but that is true for higher education. And certainly one of the challenges facing college presidents in the future, I believe in the next 5 years in particular, will be the demand that what education dollars are available be directed at K through 12. And therefore, college presidents, deans, vice presidents, department chairs, faculty, everyone is going to have to be much more adept financially. We are also facing a changing society, as this society has done repeatedly over time. Our huge waves of immigration over the centuries have had an enormous impact on how education is delivered and to whom, and that exists again. We are seeing another change in the composition of our society. Presidents will need to balance the tensions in the largest society which are played out on their campuses. We need to give more than just lip service to internationalization, in the sense that our students and our faculty and our administrators really do need to learn to become comfortable with new populations, with people who are different, and to help them, those who stay, become Americans, and those who return to their homeland to have a positive view of America and to be supportive of it. And this is a very important role for a president. And I guess the other critical thing that everyone is looking for in a president is an individual who will help his or her institution continue to move forward in the most positive way. That's a very amorphous skill, but it is being hard-nosed, it is being sensitive, it is being sympathetic, it's being caring, it's being tough, it's being wise, it's having a sense of humor, it's having a sense of vision, and ultimately it's having a dream for your institution and for your students. I think in a nutshell, those are the intangibles that we all look for. I think most people understand that presidents must have a certain level of experience, must have certain credentials, etc. But really the successful leader is someone who has a group of skills that you can't just reach out and touch. On the contrary, they reach out and touch others.
That's quite a bill. That's quite a list of things, items to fit into, and I'd be really interested in hearing your reaction to that, Dr. McDemmond. You're the first woman to ever occupy the position that you occupy, Chief Operating Officer, Vice President of Finance at a university in the state of Florida. And I think obviously you must exemplify many of the skills that we've just talked about here. And I'd like for you to react to that and tell us a little bit about, I know you've been really involved with developing leadership, a leadership pool here in the state of Florida. So in response to Mrs. Perez's description here of this perfect person we're looking for, tell us how you feel, how you hear that.
Well, thank you, Charlotte, and I'm glad to be here with you today, and especially with Maria Perez, because I think Maria capsulized what colleges and universities are struggling with. They're struggling to find that quality of leader who, in fact, can work with a diversity of people, both internal to the institution and external to the institution. We in Florida, as public institutions in particular, have to be very responsive to the legislature. And a leader who is, in fact, one that can bridge the gap often among the constituents, because we have so many that we really have to acknowledge, to take their concerns seriously and have them to understand our future and our direction. Florida is a state really at a crossroads now as we look at the influx of diverse populations, where we look at what my Chancellor, Charles Reed, calls a structural deficit problem in Florida based on votes that have happened and statutes within the legislature, particularly the funding of prisons over the next 3 to 5 years. And take all of these ideas and concepts, put them into action, and gear them for the leadership of our public institutions. Finances are going to be increasingly important, and as the first woman CFO in the state university system, it has been hard, particularly the years of 90 through 92 when we had major budget cuts in Florida. I don't think we have seen them like we will see for next legislative session and through the year 2000. On the leadership side, we were very fortunate about 4 years ago, the 1991-92 legislative session, led by initiative of Senator George Kirkpatrick, who incidentally has just become president of the Independent Colleges and Universities in Florida. Senator from Gainesville pushed forward an accountability legislation. That accountability legislation said that college and university presidents, community college, state university presidents, were going to be evaluated on how they had reached out and made women and minorities move up, or allow them to move up in their universities, in their community colleges, with Senator Kirkpatrick understanding that indeed we had to have role models. We had to have different types of people in leadership roles in our community and universities. That then led Betty Castor, who was then Commissioner of Education, to push a grant program through the next legislative session. So our first grant program, and she asked me to chair her statewide commission for 2 years, and I was reappointed under Commissioner Brogan, to really give schools an impetus to structure internal leadership. Florida has a saying, we want to grow our own, and we have a number of programs that do that. But this leadership program really allows us to select people in middle management to upper management and give them the extra skills, the extra talents and abilities that they need to get ahead. and it's been very successful. FCCJ has had a program for 2 years. My own Florida Atlantic University, in consortium with Broward Community College and Palm Beach Community College, has had a program, and now we have about 32 institutions going to be funded for the 95-96 grant program to be in November 1st.
Yeah, it's our program here at the college has brought a lot of new energy to the whole idea of leadership and defining what is leadership. And I'd like us to explore that a little bit, other than the way we've already talked about it, because as you've just mentioned, there are a lot of reductions in the budget. There are a lot of concerns about reducing administrative positions and bureaucracy. How does that impact this fact that at the same time we're saying reduce the traditional leadership spots, and yet at the same time we are training people for new leadership roles? How do you see that coming together, both from your view as a recruiter and what's happening there, and your view as an administrator in the system and trying to bring this to happen?
I think one thing, when we will be cutting back, and the reductions we will have to take over the next 3 to 5 years will necessitate that we have better leaders, that we have leaders that are in fact on a horizontal level rather than a vertical level in the organization. Ones that will be able to inspire people to get the best out of maybe a much smaller staff. So we're hoping in the leadership program statewide in Florida for women and minorities that we can in fact take the already great skills that women and minorities bring to our institutions, especially the diversity aspect, and enhance them to in fact capitalize and to learn how to do more with less, as we all will, but to inspire those who will be with us for the next 3 to 5 years to really work that extra 10%, that extra 15%, and be able to assist the universities and community colleges in going forward.
And how about you from your...
I think people want to keep in mind that leadership doesn't happen just at the top. We tend to talk about leaders and think only of the president or the chancellor, depending on the nomenclature. But leadership happens all through an organization. If you are the chair of a department, you are the leader of that department. If you are the director of the counseling staff, you are the leader of that staff. And as Marie said, whether it is good times or bad times, a leader must lead, whether they are leading 2 or 3 people or they're leading 90,000 people. And leadership changes. The existing leaders will retire. There are always leadership needs. And some of the leadership skills that people will learn through the program will not only be used in the college, they will be used in their communities. And that benefits the state, that benefits the college, that benefits the individual. From the point of view of an executive recruiter, we do not recruit just presidents. We are looking at vice presidents and deans. We recruit nationally, and certainly we would be looking at people in Florida as we would in any other state to see who are people here with leadership potential or leadership achievement who can serve the needs of another institution. So that while, yes, the budget situation may reduce the number of positions available, in a specific instance, those same talents, those same skills, that same training can be used in other institutions, in other states, and even in other fields. So it is a very wise investment in reality on the part of the state.
Well, good. Well, we feel that way. And I'd like to ask you, in terms of course, you're playing a role that no woman has gone before, and we see that happening, hopefully less and less, but we still see that happening consistently. As you look at the roles that people might play, we see that people are bringing new skills in, but we still have some wedges of leadership that haven't transformed or moved into the shared leadership arena, because it is a very different thing. And it's a hard transformation to make, I think. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that from what you see happening across the country. There is some resistance to this, I know, just simply because of people's habits. And talking about how that might change, how you might see that that could be influenced for people who are currently in leadership positions and who may be there for 10 or 15 more years?
I think as we look at, let's call new leaders and existing leaders, we have to involve the existing leaders in some of the newer training things and the newer training mechanisms that we have. Video, we're doing a great project at our university with distance learning, and for the first time we're teaching courses from the Boca campus to 4 of our other campuses. This is putting a real stress on some of our professors who are not used to being in front of the camera. The department chairs, we're trying to explain to them in their leadership role how they should inspire faculty to do this, because when it comes to the CFO, to me, I'm saying, you're producing a lot more credit hours. Guess what? You're going to get a lot more money in your budget. I think you can win a lot of people over by working with them and explaining the pros and cons, and then giving them a reward in the process. We and the state government, and we're a state agency, and the community colleges are so closely related to that as well, we get very little rewards. Mm-hmm. And the idea of being able to get the existing leaders to understand that there are really rewards out there for new things, for participating in a different forum, a different mechanism. To understand that I may be a woman CFO, I clearly do not threaten you, but we together have to make a different kind of team than we made before. And really facing reality, talking about the real budget. Our president has gone to give a State of the University address each year, as I'm sure many presidents give, and that State of the University address has gotten much more pessimistic. But having the university see that it is a university-wide responsibility to understand that the resources are not always there, we have to be leaner and smarter, and that we have to take existing leadership and carve it or sculpt it to what the new leader must be in higher education.
What about from your point of view in terms of how does this impact, across the country? In terms of resistance, do you see resistance, or because you're looking for a certain kind of person?
I think generally at the level that we search for people, which is primarily the deans, vice presidents, and presidents of institutions, we are seeing many more consultative leaders. It's really been forced on us. College and university governance has changed quite dramatically in the last 30 years. It is true that there are still individuals who operate differently, and sometimes that style is quite appropriate for the institution. Part of being a good leader at whatever level is recognizing whether your style of leadership is appropriate for the particular group of people you are leading, the particular institution you're involved with. If you're a very close to the vest, non-consultative leader, and you are in an institution where people are used to being involved, consulted, etc., you're going to fail, and you're going to fail badly. Because changing the institution's culture to suit your leadership style is not something one does easily. So being a smart leader, for lack of a better way to describe it, is really first and foremost figuring out whether it's in that department, that school, that college, whatever it might be, your leadership style is appropriate, and their culture is appropriate for you, and whether together you can both respond, i.e. you the individual and you the institution, both as leader and all of the people who make up the institution, to the leadership demands and pressures that are being put on you from the outside world.
I'd be interested if, say, a board was hiring a new president and they had a culture in their institution that they wished to change, because they can see that the culture as is going to make it very difficult for that institution to deal with what's happening from the outside and the current resources, et cetera. Can you make a good match that way when you bring in someone who may have a different leadership style?
Well, first the board needs to make a very critical decision. Do they want to make a radical change, or do they want to make incremental change? And which of the two can the institution withstand without imploding in on itself? Often people think, I want someone 180 degrees different.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily work. Sometimes it is incremental change that you need to look at. Or it is the responsibility, I believe, of a board when it conducts a presidential search to make clear to itself, to the campus, and to the candidates a group of objectives or goals or areas of accomplishment that the president is expected to achieve. They should not be large in number, they should not be amorphous, and they should have a sensible purpose to them. And wherever possible, they should have the concurrence of the campus. Because the reality is there are so many things the president must do to begin with. There are so many things that happen within a presidency that no one can anticipate when they start, and no board can anticipate, right, that if you set out a list of impossibles at the end of some period of time, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, everyone is going to be unhappy and bitterly disappointed. And then you'll start looking for another person who's 180 degrees from the one you brought in to be 180 degrees from their predecessor. And the institution ultimately pays a very high price for that.
I think we've seen some of that.
Yes, that this is happening. Maria's comments is really the phenomena of really losing so many college and university presidents. The terms of the presidency now are much shorter. And I think it's because so much change has to occur, and an institution like an organization, college and universities, do not change fast. And it is to get the right match. And the board and the university or college itself has to understand what that new leader must have and how much that new leader will need as a back support to be able to support him or her in assuming the presidency of the institution. If the board is not clear on that, if the university itself doesn't realize it has to change, the college doesn't realize it has to change, then we're setting up the president and the university or college for failure.
Often I will ask a search committee, not just at the presidential level, why are you hiring a president? What do you need one for? And they sort of look at me like, that's a very stupid question. But it's not. It's trying to force them to say, what is it we want this individual to do? And the answer, be a president, is inadequate. Because being a president is nothing more than a title. Mm-hmm. But you are hiring an individual to do something, to provide some kind of leadership. And if you don't define where you want leadership, then you're leaving that individual to make the decision themselves, and it may not be where you want it. And one of the most important things that should be done when anyone starts a search is to ask the question, what is it we want, for example, a Marie McDemmond to do?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that. In your career, obviously you've had a very successful career, and it's always fun to ask someone, did you set your sight to be this when you started out? And I'm sure with most people, it sort of evolves as you go along and your skills increase and you find out more about each other, but maybe not. Some other people set out and say, I want to be a college president, or I want to be a chief financial officer. So I wonder if we have just a few minutes left, but I wonder if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about your own career path.
Well, I was very determined as a young woman. I don't know if you can tell that from me now, but I always wanted to be the boss. And I took that to be, in fact, a school teacher, the boss of the class, and eventually to be a principal. And then I began to see that money controlled a lot. So I clearly said I want to learn how to manage resources, and manage resources not just dollar-wise, but people-wise, equipment-wise, facilities-wise. As a chief operating officer now, I do everything from the construction to the computing to environmental health and safety areas. Also, as a graduate faculty member, I teach, so it's a wonderful diversity that I have. I don't think I planned it that well, Charlotte. I do think at maybe about 10 years ago, I started to see a clear path to knowing I had to get the doctorate, it had to be finance related, it had to involve a number of management issues, because you must know the landscape around which you're living. And I think anybody right now that doesn't see the financial difficulties American higher education will be facing really don't deserve any leadership responsibility or any management responsibility. So I began to really look at structuring my life and my career, particularly the credentialing part of it, to really get to that area.
We just have a minute left, and I wonder if you could just sort of, in a nutshell, if you had to tell somebody what skill to develop for their leadership and for moving forward, can you put that in 1 or 2 words, what you might say to them, what advice you would say to them?
Mine would be have excellent interpersonal skills.
Excellent interpersonal skills.
I would say excellent interpersonal skills, excellent financial skills, and be a risk taker.
So I think our job is cut out for us in bringing this information to our women and minority group and to other people in the college as we look at how we bring this together. Thank you so much for being with us today. I think I could talk to you for a really long time, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear from you, but we do have to end now. This has been Worth Quoting at Florida Community College in Jacksonville. Thank you for being with us today.